Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here today, and thanks for connecting to our event today. We're holding World Autism Awareness Day, and it's awesome having this conversation because uh, it's remarkable to celebrate, identify with, and um, notice special people in a community in the world, and to pay attention to them and um, support them. And today is remarkable because it's World Autism Awareness Day is 2nd of April every year, and this is backed by the United Nations. And we just want to have a conversation around how we can provide the needed support that individuals with autism that they need. And I am so excited, and it's a great privilege that we have today with us a distinguished scholar. She's a professor, and she's married. She has a daughter, and I'm going to say more about her, but for me, it's very interesting because she does so much in the autism space, and one of the known voices in the United States of America when you talk about autism, and particularly when you're interfacing it with sexuality, and you're just thinking about the care of autistic children. This is what she does, and we just want to have a chat on what we can do in support of autistic people in the society. So just before we get into conversation, I want to ask you to please share this live stream, whether on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. Please share with your friends, share with your family members, share with your loved ones. Please invite as many persons as you can. Give us a thumbs up on our feeds, and let's get to more people who need it. Yes, let's get to more people who need it, because it's going to greatly bless them. It's going to be in support of their families, right? And yeah, you'll be grateful you're a part of something that's worthwhile. So I want to say, Mr. CREHAN, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we are so excited to have you. And when we think about autism, it's you think about the challenges that comes with it, right? And all we just want to do today is kind of in conversation see what we can do in providing support for persons who have autism, and for parents who may have autistic children. What Faith Ministry does is we are particularly have the goal of raising godly seeds, and we provide parenting education. We are very much interested in child growth and development, and we want to support as many parents as possible. And we know there are parents who have children who have autism. So in some places, it's much known about. There's so much going around about it. And in some other places, maybe not so much of information and knowledge. But what we want to do today is fill those gaps and see how we can help individuals with autism grow, develop, and being able to live normal lives like every other person, right? So thanks for joining us. And I'm just going to, make reference to the UN as we get started. The theme for this year's World Autism Awareness Day is advancing neurodiversity in childhood, aligning with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So when we talk about neurodiversity, we see people in the society, how we can advance that, particularly in childhood, and I mean, if not childhood, when is the best time to do it, right? Advance that in childhood, and how to connect that to sustainable development goals. I've heard so much about sustainable development goals in the years past. It's so much talked about in Nigeria, and the UN itself kind of looking ahead to see where should the world be and what should be going on in corners of the world at certain times of the year. So we're going to get into a conversation, and just briefly, I know neurodiversity is talking about persons who are in some way different from other people. Just want you to shed a little bit of light on that before we advance into different other topics. I mean, subtopics to discuss.
No, and I think thank you for putting a spotlight on this, because I think I'm really excited that this is the framework for World Autism Day, because this idea of neurodiversity is really a shift from how we've talked about autism in the past. So the old framework was very much someone's autistic and we need to fix something. And this neurodiversity lens is much more affirming and supportive and collaborative, where it says essentially all of our brains work really differently. And that's actually really good, right, for society. And so looking at it from more of a strengths-based lens, where yes, if people have support needs that they're needing or wanting support with, we can do that. But what are people's strengths, and that we don't want to try and get everyone to look at what normal is, because what is normal, right? Especially in childhood. I mean, all across life. But so neurodiversity, I think, is really, we're at a very interesting moment in history where I think the paradigm is starting to shift toward this idea of all brains are good brains. There are no bad brains, but there are different ways that we intake information.
I mean, I've always believed that. There's nothing that is bad, right? When you think about children, children are gifts from God, and God isn't wicked to give bad gifts to people. So, of course, because it's a little bit demanding, raising autistic children, so how do we go about it, right? That's nice. So I think I would just take a progression from identification, and talking about early identification and support, because early support, early identification is critical for neurodivergent children, and particularly focusing on autism. And of course, access to resources vary widely depending on places and depending on the people that are there. And how can we ensure that every child receives the right care? Thinking from the place of identification, just into provision of resources.
Yes, right, because that's such an important moment. So I think there's a couple of interesting things. One is that if any sort of early pediatricians or educators know what some traits of autism might look like in young children, so they can the more universally we do screenings, the more we can help. But we're also seeing a really significant portion of people who are sort of figuring out a little bit later in life that they're autistic, right? So it's the early childhood screening, and then also sort of continuing on just to sort of keep an eye as people go forward. But there's not enough people who know a lot about autism, or there's not enough specialists. There's always a lot of waiting for services. It's a really, I think we've talked about this a little bit, even in school settings where you would hope students would be able to come and get resources. It depends a lot on the team at the school and not necessarily universal services.
So from what you just said, No, I'm picking up my thoughts from persons who in the care of children, we call some persons first responders.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So now I'm just using that like metaphor to talk about persons who might kind of raise the alarm. And I think pediatricians are in good position to do that when they care for children. So, but I'm just thinking like what amount of knowledge about neurodiversity is included in the training?
Yes, not enough, right? Very often, like autism and other developmental disabilities, there's sort of a specialized training program. So there's some information, and it's definitely growing, but I think there's a lot of sometimes like hesitation with pediatricians who aren't specialists to diagnose because they don't want to get it wrong, right? Like that's a label someone might carry with them for a long time. So that's some of the work that we do in my research lab is how do we better prepare healthcare providers to like talk about autism and notice autism. Yeah.
So I think it's I mean by the end of this program we'll be talking about call to action and kind of see one already like what the government, what institutions would need to be adding up to training of make it kind of broader medical personnel, right? People who serve children, pediatrician, pediatric nurses. I mean, these are people that can see things and they can say them, and parents typically would trust them. Like, I give my child to a doctor because there's a level of trust that parents do have in them. So if they do not know, it's a big issue for parents, for children, for families, and for the society. That's kind of I wouldn't say painful, but kind of shocking.
But to also like get that sometimes like it sometimes can be a big shift to get like a first diagnosis, but sometimes there's a little bit of level of like comfort in it. You're like, oh, okay, I have a word for what I'm seeing. Like my friend's kid is maybe like talking already and my child isn't, like what's going on. So it can give a little bit of a framework. And something I don't think we do a great job at is connecting parents of young kids with parents of older kids, right? Who have been through it. Their kids are, maybe they're thriving, maybe they're still having struggles, but their parents have been, advocating for their kids. And so like sort of pairing them up. So you have, we all do well with mentors, right? Like someone like, oh, I've been through this. And you don't know, like as a, I have my toddler, I haven't parented before, right? You don't know, you're doing a lot of guesswork. You're like following what you think is right. But I think finding some way to mobilize community can also be a good way to share resources.
Nice. I'm just kind of thinking and noticing issues, and one of those things that we need to do again is building a community of support for parents and children that are in this space, because it will do us a lot of good. It's kind of ringing in my head, connecting parents of older children who are autistic to parents of younger children who are autistic. There can be a lot of desperate coaching, right? So there's a lot that parents can learn from one another. As much as we have children that have the same kind of special attention as needed, and I think it's a lot meaningful if there's some kind of connection.
Because it's like the services and the support, and there's been all sorts of interesting studies on even having like teen or like autistic teens or autistic adults who are working with younger kids as like peer mentors. Like I think there's a lot of opportunity for just like building on that community strength. I would actually wonder in the work that you do, like if you were working with parents of autistic kids, like how many of them either enter the workforce related to autism or have to become such specialists in knowing about like what works for education, what works for treatment, and like people are just figuring this out on their
on
own.
their own. Yeah, a lot of parents are figuring out a lot of things on their own, and learning on the job. But no, it's not usually the best of approach. When it comes to raising children.
Yes, right? Don't do it alone.
Kind of try and error approach.
Yeah,
which is not always the best.
Yeah.
I kind of move to talk about one of the SDG goals, which is quality education, and to think about children that are autistic, how inclusive the education is. I know you would have at one point or the other done some work with schools. Maybe for some research work or some partnership, but just thinking what is it like thinking about inclusive education? Where are we supposed to be? What's the gap like?
I think ideally, I think we're moving toward an understanding that to really sort of educate connected groups of people, having folks together is the best. So like when we think about special education for autism, we also need to be thinking about teaching non-autistic kids about autism, right? So that they can understand that. There's a great character on Sesame Street they introduced a few years ago who's autistic, and like the other characters sort of learn how to play with that character because it's just a different way of seeing the world. So I think in an ideal world, we would be talking about what all the different things that kids experience and go through and how to be accepting of that. I think also sometimes in education we overlook like let's say like a autistic kid has a special interest, right? So let's say they really like like anything. Let's say they really like trains, right? Or they really like bugs, right? Like there's something that they're really interested in. That can be a really great motivator to learn more and to connect with peers, right? Like I think like bugs is a really good example. If you've got a young kid who's like really only wants to talk about bugs, I promise you can find other kids who want to talk about bugs, right? Like that's So I think we could probably, if we use this sort of strengths-based perspective, we could, like, the kid would be happy talking about what they like or like interacting with what they like, and then also build on their educational goals.
And thanks for mentioning this. Something that just came to my mind before I go to that, please, if you're watching, is the World Autism Awareness Day, and we're talking about advancing neurodiversity. And we're talking about how families who have children that are autistic can best be supported. And please, if you're watching on YouTube, please give thumbs up, like the stream, share with friends, share with families. We want to reach as many parents as possible. We want to reach as many families as possible. We understand not all of them have access to all the information they need, and this might just be something that a family needs that would help them. So please do share, call on loved ones, call on friends, and let them join us. So there's something I want to talk about, and that's play. I understand, and I've seen it, that play is I don't know how I'm going to define play in the later, right? It sounds so simple, but defining it it's a little bit challenging. But I would say it's the opportunity to have that you have for children to learn their society, to learn their environment, right? And
it's like the foundation of all your other
skills. They learn a lot of skills in play. Play with themselves, play with toys, play with peers, all of that coming into play. And I'm thinking about autistic children. I know there's a possibility to be overprotective when someone has an autistic child. So what do you think about play, social inclusion, for autistic children, what should that translate to for their families? What should that translate to for the society, for instance, like schools, and how the kind of opportunities we have for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a really great place, especially in early childhood, for parents to get as involved with their kids as possible, because what we see with those very early social skills is that they build on each other, right? And so, for example, if you've got a little kid and maybe part of their autism diagnosis is they like to play with stuff in front of them and they're not really interested in what you're doing, finding ways to encourage the parent to get involved in their play to start instead of trying to get them to play with something else, so that you're building this nice feeling like, look, mommy's playing with you and we're having a good time, we're doing what you want. And then you can sort of slowly start to see, okay, what other things might be fun to play with. Yeah. So that there's actually, it's reciprocal imitation training is the formal name for one of the like early play skill development.
I know there's server return, but that's I'll say that's probably that's more than play. That's like, of course, I mean, touches on interaction with the child. That's a whole lot, including play, communication, training social skills, and all of that for the child. And so it seems like parents need to learn how to introduce their children to play. Of course, like autism would have different manifestations and expressions for different children.
Sure. I think that the other, I was just thinking of as you were talking, like also keeping in mind, it is a very sort of natural human reaction if someone is not sort of seeking you out to play or trying to get your attention, that we don't necessarily seek them out, right? And so like, especially let's say if you've got a kid for whatever reason who isn't sort of making those like requests to play, or like, here, mommy, come look at this, it can be hard to remind yourself that, so that reminding yourself to keep giving those opportunities for play and interaction. And then also like the mental care that can also be tiring. It's a lot to keep track of, right? If you're parenting a young kid, you're tired, you may be worried. And then also, something that we've talked about in our research, we work with a lot of autistic adults, like because there can be a genetic component to autism, sometimes parents might have, either might be autistic or have some autistic traits. And so they're like, oh, this has worked for me, but this isn't working for this particular child. So it's, that's any parent-child fit, like figuring out how to navigate two personalities.
So I want to start thinking about inequalities and reducing that. We see in the society, it seems like there are classes. Someone is on the upper class or middle class, or those in the lower class, and we kind of see that sometimes show up in how children develop. There's a lot of things that could affect children depending on the socioeconomic ability of the family. And just thinking about for families that have autistic children, what could that mean for them, and how can they navigate this issue of inequalities in terms of resources?
That's a tough question, right? So it tends to be that many autism services, like the more financial resources you have, the easier they are to access. We also, it's really interesting, I think, to me, from what we know, that the rates of autism are the same across like race, country, socioeconomic status, just whether or not we're screening people. So a really big inequality topic that's been coming up in autism is that boys are so much more frequently diagnosed than girls, right? And so for a long time, we thought it was just because it was more common in boys, and that, may be true, but we developed all of our screening measures and assessments for autism based on fairly wealthy white boys, right? So all of the, for a socially defined diagnosis, that's what we were looking for, like how boys are behaving. And so some of the gender related work has found that like girls or folks who were socialized female growing up are, the behavioral expectations are a little bit different. And so maybe if we had different or more tailored assessment procedures for them, the rates would be more similar. So that's sort of still ongoing, but that's one like inequality piece that always really stands out to me. And then in the US, this falls along all the lines of service breakdowns where we always see where like white children, their diagnoses rates are higher because they're getting access to those services, and that providers are less likely to misdiagnose them with something else, which happens more with Black and brown children in this country in particular.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about, so for those that may seem like they are being affected by the inequalities, what would be their saving grace?
Yeah.
What would be that thing that they can do that might help them?
Yeah. I feel like a broker getting a sense of community, right? So that there are organizations that are focused specifically on like autism in girls, right? Or like there are a lot of communities that are like folks of color and who have autism, folks who are LGBTQ and have autism. So there's like a lot of sub communities, and so figuring out how to sort of advocate, getting that community knowledge about what might be helpful, and finding a provider who like believes you and recognizes that, which is much easier said than done, but who can say, hey, I'm concerned about this, let's say for my daughter, and I think people are overlooking it because she's a girl. Like, what do you think? Just bringing the topic to the table.
Yeah, and and so I'm thinking about, with my background, I'm thinking about what works here and what works in other parts of the world. Right? So I think having a sense of community is going to be very important and powerful too.
Yeah.
Families and children that are autistic, I also think that some other things that I would have to deal with in the society is stigma, name calling, where people in the society are not welcoming of receiving, persons that are neurodivergent or with other disabilities, right? And I think it's something that families need to deal with. And when the family sees another family that kind of have children that have the same disability, I think it's good to start forming that kind of bond, because it eventually would be helpful for the family. For instance, I know in Nigeria, like because of the level of knowledge, I would say maybe the level of awareness. It's not the climb is kind of different, because most children are probably not health insured, and parents have to pay out of pocket for services if they're going to get services.
Yeah.
Of course, there are persons who are going to that space and are becoming professionals, but then it's going to be very expensive.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So all of these are what parents need to deal with. But I believe, if a family meets another family and they both have autistic children, I don't think they need to pay themselves to relate as families. Right? They don't need to pay for that. So if families are creating safe spaces for themselves where they can come to share what's working for them, their personal spaces, I believe it's can mean a lot for families, and it would actually help reduce inequalities.
Yeah. And it's really like, they're saying it becomes the responsibility of folks not in that family for us, as a non-autistic person, to do that work with my own stigma, right? So like, what are my beliefs about autism, and is that true for this kid in front of me or this adult in front of me? Like, but that's harder to intervene with when you're talking about the population at large, as opposed to just supporting, families who have autistic kids. It's an interesting dynamic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's a lot of thoughts. And okay, I'm going to push our conversation. And I'm going to think about technology and innovation. In the recent time, we've seen a spike of technology. We're experiencing in our lifetime. We are seeing a lot of innovations coming in technologies and all of that. And how best can autistic children be supported with tech and innovation? In what ways? Right now, there's a lot going on with AI. Things could change over time, right?
Yeah.
It's always evolving, new things always coming up. But how can parents find technology very useful to support their autistic children? How can parents leverage on that? It's like, yeah.
So can I give an example? From
definitely.
So one example, actually this relates to what we were talking about a second ago. So there's been some really interesting, so let's say you're trying to teach a young kid who has a special interest in trains and you're trying to teach him how to read, right? But he just wants to think about trains and look at trains and play with trains. They've done some really interesting work where if you make the reading lessons related to trains, kids would be more motivated to do that. That is a lot of work for each teacher to individually change that. But you can use things like, let's say ChatGPT or some sort of like AI tools where you can say, hey, here's the exercise, make this about trains, right? And that sort of automates that process. So something that would have taken, a teacher or parent weeks before it's really like, as someone who's not that great with AI, it's been really impressive. But there's also, it's not so much AI specific, but there have been some of the models for how we share information about autism. Have you heard about Project Echo? I forget if we talked about. It's like
very different.
Yeah. So it's like an educational model. So the idea is like at the center, you would have like 5, let's say, professionals. So like, maybe a pediatrician or like a parent who has an older kid with autism. And then they would meet once a month, let's say through telehealth, and all folks from all over would come and hear like a case study and then ask questions to each other. So it's like community learning, but online. And the idea is that you're moving ideas, not people, is their sort of tagline. And so something like that, it's not AI, it's still like human knowledge, but it's moving it at a faster rate than waiting for one doctor to go to a training and to tell that to each of the parents and families that they work with.
Right. So some kind of collaboration.
Yeah, it's like a collaborative learning.
Yeah. Because there's a tendency for parents to, aside autistic children, there's this tendency for parents to, for some peace, I would say peace in code, right? They kind of allow children to devices, you can play games, take the time as much as the parent is not disturbed. Right at that time. And if care is not taken, parents of autistic children might go that path. If those children find devices like what they could use, and they get so attracted by those devices because they could do some stuff on it. So just like, how far can parents go in that, particularly parents of autistic children, in terms of devices? And if there are sometimes like maybe apps or relevant online platforms that could actually be helpful in supporting autistic children.
Yeah. I don't know if I have the names of like specific apps that can be great, because that's like less my area of knowledge. I do know there are like one example we talk about one in my classes is Minecraft, like so I don't know much about Minecraft, but there's like one server that's just for autistic children. So like the dad who runs it, his child is autistic, he felt like he was getting bullied online, and so he created this like autism specific space. So like that's not an educational space, thank you, but it is like a safe like social support, which I think is good. And that you can also use technology as a way to like bond. Like if you have a kid who likes a particular game, like playing it with him, or learn, like the advice across all childhood, like as we see increased media use, is the best thing a parent can do is learn about that media and use it together with them or ask them questions so that it's not foreign to you. That helps both for connecting with your child, but also for safety, because a lot of those online platforms are
right. So talking about safety, because as much as we see spike in technology and all of that, be thinking about the safety of using those platforms and resources. And if care is not taken, a lot of harm can a lot of damage can happen through that. But it's awesome that parents leverage on the resources that are available.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there are definitely sites, online platforms that have resources. I would say apps. Someone recently reached out to me. I was talking about, it's someone in a founder of a growing tech-related company, and supporting children that are neurodiverse, particularly dyslexic, helping them read, in supporting them towards education, right? Particularly on education. And I think that's interesting for parents of autistic children. These are tools that could help them reduce their stress and help them achieve more results. By the way these tools are deployed and used to work with the kids. It's interesting that things are changing. Because
right, the good and the bad of it, right? It can be, there's challenges to using it, but then also that's part of our world now. So how can we prepare kids to use it effectively?
I think I'm going to throw one question at our viewers, and you can see comments from this end. And the question I want to ask for anyone that may be viewing this program live, maybe on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, the question I want to ask is this: if you could change one thing in the world to make the world more inclusive for neurodivergent children, we're talking about children with autism. I would say children, then we don't say the spectrum anymore, right?
Yeah, the language has changed a little bit.
Children that are neurodiverse, children that have some kind of disabilities or the other. If you could change one thing in the world, what would you change? So if you are with us online, could you please just post what would you change in the world? If there's one thing you could change in support of children that are neurodiverse, autistic children, children that have one disability or the other, what would you change? We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know your thoughts before Professor CREHAN would talk about that. Yes, we are looking to see your responses. If there's something you could do to support children that are neurodivergent, what would that be? I think while we're still waiting for people to respond, I think I will let you respond to that. What practical things should we be changing in the society because of children that are autistic? Something I've seen around here very well is the when it comes to supporting persons who have disability with movement, like maybe handicapped, and they use So we've seen a lot of I don't know what that's called. To push.
Yes, the buttons. Yes.
All the buttons for doors to open, and they don't have to struggle with the door by themselves. I've seen that I've seen that around. I've seen that in places. At least I'm sure I've seen that somewhere else, and I believe a lot of organizations put that in place to support persons. So just thinking about autistic children, children that are neurodivergent, what practical steps could parents take to support them? I'm going to extend that, but I think we can deal with that before I extend.
Yeah. Can I be very specific?
Definitely.
Okay. So I think if I had to pick one, I would say understanding the sensory environment of your autistic child, because oftentimes reactions to sensory, so like smell, sound, sight, can be so strong. And for kids, you're sifting through a lot of information. If you're spending a lot of information managing the fact that you're hearing an uncomfortable sound, you're not really going to be able to engage with something else because you're busy on this. So if, one idea would be to go into a space and be, okay, what are the smells? What are the sounds, right? What are the sights? Are these things that might be upsetting or challenging for my child? Or are there things that could make this more comfortable, right? So like, is it, my child really likes how things feel that are soft. If we get them like a soft, right? Like stuffed animal or something to touch when we know we're going into a stressful situation, just to like make things a little easier, sort of like taking a vitamin, right? That is one thing that I think is like fairly easy and low cost, but we just have to think of it.
Yeah. I was working on the material, and I was just thinking about how we could provide opportunities for children to play with little or no resources. Yeah, I think I'm going to do more in that. And it's going to come with kind of a book or some kind of material that people can access online. I mean, it's good to think about what parents can do, not necessarily thinking about the money, but what are the things parents can do to practically support the children, and thinking about sensory. So, smell, touch, things they feel, maybe sound. I think there are children that sensory overload, they're not able to process so much sound at a time, and like it might be something for a parent to think about. So maybe I want to go to grocery and want to go with that child. It might be something to actually think about before going. What's that grocery going to look like? What's the store going to look like? At what time of the day am I going there? Maybe those are the issues to think about. Like, would it be preferable to go in the morning hours? I'm going to go with this child, rather than going around dusk when a lot of people are at the store. So I guess those are issues that parents may want to think about. Okay, so let's extend that into the broader society. So if you're going to take practical steps in the society, what steps should we be taking as institutions, as government? What practical steps should we be taking in supporting children that are autistic?
I think if we could understand, like at all those levels, like that behavior as communication, I think that would solve a lot of challenges. So like, for example, right, like some autistic kids engage in repetitive movements. So they might flap their hands, they might rock back and forth. And very often people are like, let's try to get you to do that less, right? And that always upsets me, because for many autistic kids, especially, and although not always, if they're talking less, right, then that is a way that they're telling you something. Sometimes it's kids expressing that they're nervous about something, even if they're not able to tell you that. And sometimes it's that they're excited about something. So it's actually like a joyful moment. And I wish that governments, schools, doctors, all of us would be better being like, okay, there's a behavior happening. What does that mean? And not just let's change it. So I think that would be something that I would like to see.
So it does seem like it's not everything that we have to change. We don't have to, these are the signs we see when this person is autistic, and we see that, or these are, things that an autistic person will engage in. Let us stop it. Let us take that away from them, so that they will stop being autistic. It should not be coming from that perspective.
It's like, what can we do? It's like, what is driving this behavior? Is it a positive behavior or a negative behavior?
Right.
Or even like some advice I give to families, like if they've got, let's say a kid, like let's say they like to rock back and forth, and that's calming for them. If you have to go take them, let's say to the grocery store, and that's going to be stressful, let's sit in the car, right? Let's sit outside. Let's rock for a few minutes and get our systems to sort of calm down before we go in. Like you can, like behaviors communication.
Yeah, and I feel parents need to listen more in the society. We need to be tolerant of more things. But when we see certain things in the society, so you see a child at the store, kind of exhibiting certain behaviors, and like you kind of look at the parents with a corner of the eye, like,
Yeah.
what's your problem? Why would we this kind of child in the store? And we don't. I mean, parents see those things and they are emotionally disturbed. A lot of them, they don't feel supported. It's a lot of strain
Yes.
on them, and yeah, it's like we need to listen more to autistic children. I would say
Yeah.
that's it's seeming like that for me. Like what I'm doing is not necessarily that I don't necessarily want to be disruptive. It's something that is going on that is making me do this.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, that's true for all kids, right? I mean, working with children in schools, like if they are doing a behavior that's unusual for them, you're like, something's happening. And like, they're just not able to tell you because maybe they're 3 or 4, but like, but so that's we get to be detectives for that, but yeah. Well,
all right. I'm going to take this, we have like 2 comments. Stigmatization should be completely eradicated. Yeah, and I think the more of awareness we are creating, the more we have these conversations and talk about issues, the more we remove the stigma from the society, and we're not seeing them as odd and persons that should not have any place in the society. So there is this other comments. I will change the negative mindset of people in dealing with such children, especially in my country where most people are not aware of the specialness of those children. So there are people that in other parts of the world where there isn't much awareness, like I would say in the US, and less resources as well. But to keep talking about these things and people's mindset, it's a lot because when I see that child, I don't want to have to relate with that child. So I just stay clear and stay away. So I believe all of this can be meaningful in supporting these children. Yeah, and I think we just take the last point that OP we can talk about is of course, because autism has been with us for a while and awareness is growing, transitioning from childhood to adulthood. What would you have like an advice counsel for parents in supporting their children transitioning from childhood to adulthood? In the SDG part of the SDG, we talk about economic growth, right? So what steps would be needed?
Yeah, I'm really interested by this, like what happens in adolescence and adulthood, right? Because for a long time it was just seen as childhood diagnosis, which is not true. People like grow up and are still autistic. I think what I talk to parents about a lot is like really thinking about how to cultivate and sort of encourage like confidence and independence as kids get older, right? All of us as parents have this drive to like take care of you, right? And we'll help you do it, which is good, but learning how to scale that back. For many kids who are not autistic, kids will tell us that. I do it myself, mama, right? Like, no, don't touch me, right? And sometimes, although not always, but like autistic kids won't say that or will have like that they'll come to that a little bit later in life. And so as parents, it's then our responsibility to be like, let's see if I can back off from my prompting one level here. So let's say if usually I'm like telling you to go get dressed, maybe tomorrow I could say, we have to go out, right? And see if your child makes that jump, which it's slow and it takes time to practice those skills, but just working towards more independence, because the more independence and autonomy we have, the better that is for us as humans. That's
definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this language we use, scaffolding, right?
Yes.
Scaffolding is not supposed to be the structure.
Yes. Yeah.
Scaffolding is supposed to, provide that support for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And when what you're putting up is there and is in place, you're withdrawing that.
Yeah.
And the structure can be there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just kind of relating that to, autistic children when they're, transitioning from childhood to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
You would just, over time, right, kind of the support or the things put in place. Definitely, of course, not all at the goal, right? But a bit seeing how they can pick cues, understand things better, and if they are able to develop that independence, we don't have to put everything there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they can get those things on their own. They can self-care, life skills, and all of that. Yeah. And so as we wrap up this session, thinking about call to action for parents, call to action for the public, people in society, call to action for the government, call to action for special education providers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just drop
Yes.
what each.
Oof. I think maybe awareness would be the big. So, like, if all of us can think of one or two people who don't know much about autism, and we have, especially if you have a personal story to tell, then can I tell you my story, right? Because if they already know you, you're already going to have that connection to build on, and I think it's going to be person by person and story by story. I think
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But for parents and government, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the more you can reach out to your officials, either writing, showing up. Like I know in Boston we have an Autism Advocacy Day next week where a bunch of us show up at the State House and we're like, hey,
listen to
us. Yeah,
right.
The more sort of noise you can make tends to get more attention. I don't love that that's the way that it has to be done, but
it doesn't have to be that way. But sometimes
it
happens like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, and it's awesome to think about autistic children, and I mean, a couple of years back, that was my first time of meeting in person, children that are autistic, and since then, it's somehow, some way, I've had to touch something autistic at one time or the other. Either you get to see person who might, be in that space, or personal development and all of that. And it's interesting that we're talking about this today. And I just want to say thank you so much, man. We are so excited to have you. Talk, in the commemoration of autistic people all over the world, World Autism Awareness Day. It's a lot for parents and families, and we hope that some of the insights you've shared would be useful for families, and particularly in the raising of the autistic children. And we hope that it will get better, right? Yeah, because we do realize there is an increase in the rate of autism that we see in society. We do hope that there is going to be increase in support.
Yes, yeah.
To that will be commensurate to meeting the demand of the increase in the cases that we see. So we just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
It's great having you talk to us and talk to our audience on this day. And we're open things get better. Thank you so much, Professor CREHAN. And our viewers, we are so excited to to have you join us today. We believe you've learned, one thing or the other. If you don't have an autistic child, you can support a family that has that has an autistic child, right? You have an autistic child, yes, you can do so much in supporting them and caring for them and um, assessing resources in you know places where you are, assessing the support system that would be very meaningful to you. Thank you so much. Please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have not done that, please do that right now. And I'm going to leave you with a very important information. We're starting a language challenge. Um, the link to register will be dropped in a comment section. Please click it, register for our language challenge, and we will communicate with you more on that. Something very exciting that is going to be coming up later in the year. We are planning something very exciting, and it's Infant and Early Child Mental Health Conference. It's going to be in Nigeria, right? And we're thinking, let's reach out to the people. Let's reach out to people. Talk about this.
Community build.
Right. Talk about this and get this known in different places. That even young children do sometimes have mental health issues that they need to be helped about. So yeah, that's come later in the year. Let's get excited and expect more. Yes, information would be sent across on our platforms and you will be able to access whatever we're putting there. I want to say thank you for joining us today. I'm Samuel Ojediji. I'm the president of Faith Ministry, and on behalf of all the team, we say thank you and do have a blessed week and month. Thank you. God bless you.